Tokyo's skyline has a swope of 500 skyscrapers and streets buzzing with nearly 15 million inhabitants. The Japanese capital showcases the possibilities of the third world economy. However, it has not been invulnerable to the external economic shocks that have shaken the world. Japan wants to become the partner of Africa with a different model of cooperation. Japan's miraculous economic transformation in the 1960s is based largely on the automotive industry, equipment and technological innovation, as in many sectors in which Japan promises to provide more training to young people. The skills transfer has already begun in some companies. 30,000 young Africans will be trained in the next 3 years. This was announced by the Japanese government at the last Tokyo International Conference on African Development. Daikin, a company specializing in air condition, has a head start. 5 technicians from the DRC were trained here on a program that spanned over 3 years. The training focused on the installation and maintenance of machines valued in the Sub-Saharan region.
This is the first training room. It is where trainees learn about cooling systems.
The African market is on the move. The GDP of the continent is expected to reach some $2.9 trillion by 2020. Despite the growth rate, the challenges of development remains numerous. An observation made by Polyglue, a social enterprise with an ambition to reduce the volume of polluted water bodies in Africa. Kanitoshi Oda is the founder. He designed the agent composed of soya beans that makes it possible to purify unclean water. The product, once poured into the water, condenses the bacteria and dirt. The dirt is then extracted by filtering in order to obtain potable water.
In these areas, the infant mortality rate was 5% before the water was purified. But after introducing Polyglue agent, this rate has fallen to 2% or even 1.8%.
The event has employed 3,000 people locally, a more viable business cooperation is said than the assistance provided by some NGOs in Africa.
I can give you an example. Save the Children had an initiative based on donations. They had set up a water purification unit, but once the project came to an end, the team simply left, abandoning the local population. That's like committing a crime.
Other Japanese companies are also undertaking development-oriented projects. This is the case of LIXIL, a company designing latrines suitable for areas without sanitary facilities. The system transforms human excreta into fertilizer.
This is one of them. As you can see, it's a seated toilet, stool type. Yeah. In Africa, there are already millions of pit latrines in many different countries. It creates actually an airtight seal because some of the water that people use to flush gets maintained in that door. With the way it is before, with just an open hole, it's very unpleasant for people. It prevents flying insects from getting into the pit. And flying insects are actually the main route of disease transmission. We work with local manufacturing partners, so it does create jobs. It creates jobs in the factory, but all along the supply chain as well, right? It goes out to small hardware stores. These are quite easy to install. They can be installed in an hour or two over an existing latrine. So far, we now manufacture in Uganda. Within the next 2 months, we'll be starting in Kenya.
Solid waste, we can make a compost as a soil conditioner. But from the liquid waste, we can create like a liquid fertilizer. When I visited the Kenya, and I had no Kenyan farmers use the fertilizer made from the human waste. And so their psychological barrier was very high. So to get understanding from the local farmers and to use our material, we have to work together. Our project is not the volunteer work. We have to we have to do something, the business, or make a profit to sustain.
At the last TICAD summit in Nairobi, 73 agreements were signed to boost trade relations between Japan and Africa. The agreements in principle were criticized by the Chinese special envoy to Kenya, for whom Japan could be added to the long list of countries that made broken promises to Africans. But Japanese investors are putting concrete plans on the table. The Socata Group, a world leader in vegetable and floral seeds, is already in South Africa, an ambition to expand its activities on the continent.
農業の発展が国の発展の基本だと、基礎だというコメントを確認することができました。
Most of the leaders presented at the TICAD agreement say development necessarily passes through agriculture.
私どもにとって
Agriculture begins with the seed.
ポテンシャルを感じた次第です。
Africa represents a huge potential for us,
レベルといいますか、
but on the spot, there is still much to be done.
少しかかると思いますけれども、まあそういったことのお手伝いをしな
We
がら
want to work with local farmers in order to help them diversify and develop the sector.
発展していけばいいかなというふうに思います。
The idea of an equal partnership between Japanese and Africans implies that technology transfer isn't unilateral. An example of such is a company called Kansai Paints, where the new anti-mosquito paint formulated didn't come from the headquarters in Japan.
Our South African chemists presented this technology at a world meeting. This drew the interest of our chemist in Malaysia, who has adopted it to the climate of the country. In 2016, we built 2 joint ventures in Kenya and Nigeria. Now we are going to give them the operational direction. We teach them our way of doing things, our technology. However, we respect and attach importance to local expertise.